A Virtual Pilgrimage of the New Testament, Episode 5, The Suffering, Death, and Resurrection of Jesus Christ. Number 49, where Jesus was held as prisoner, St. Peter in Gallicantu. Then Peter said, "Man, I do not know what you are saying." And immediately, while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he had said to him, "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." So Peter went out and wept bitterly. Luke 22, 60-62. In the year 333 AD, pilgrims reported visiting the house of Caiaphas the high priest in Jerusalem. Then in 457 AD, a church was built at the site of Peter's denial of Jesus. The present church was built in 1932 and is called the Church of St. Peter in Gallicantu. Gallicantu means cock crow and is on the eastern slope of Mount Zion. After Jesus' arrest in the Garden of Gethsemane, Peter followed right into the courtyard of the high priest Caiaphas. At this place, Peter denied Jesus 3 times before the rooster crowed twice. Today, a golden rooster sits on top of a black cross to remind pilgrims of Peter's denial and repentance. Then Jesus was unjustly tried and condemned as deserving of death. He was placed in a dungeon after his mock trial, awaiting trial before the Roman governor Pontius Pilate. This dungeon is called Christ's prison, and Jesus would have been lowered by rope harness. Like Joseph, who was betrayed by his brothers and thrown into a pit, Jesus would have spent hours here before his suffering and crucifixion for the sins of the world. This is now a sacred place of pilgrimage for Christians. Number 50, Herod's Palace, Jerusalem, where Jesus tried. Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, saying, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus said to him, "It is as you say." And while he was being accused by the chief priests and elders, he did not reply. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?" But he answered him not one word, so that the governor marveled greatly. Matthew 27:11-14. This site, named the Kishli, right next to the Citadel and Tower of David complex, is where Amit Reim, an Israeli archaeologist, started excavations in 1999. When he dug through layers of history, he uncovered the foundation of a fortification wall built by Hezekiah, a defensive wall from the Hasmonean period, and Herod the Great's Jerusalem palace wall. This palace was a very large complex, and after Herod's death, the sons of Herod and Roman officials would administer much of Palestine from the building. While the prefect would normally be at the provincial capital Caesarea, he would travel to Jerusalem for Passover in order to maintain order among the masses of Jews who converged on the temple from the entire region. It was here that Pontius Pilate tried Jesus Christ. Here Jesus fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah, which foretold that Jesus would be led as a lamb to the slaughter and silent as a quiet lamb before shearing. It was also here that Jesus Christ fulfilled the prophecy of Micah, which said that men will strike the judge of Israel with the rod on the cheek. This occurred when the Roman soldiers mocked Jesus, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." Number 51. The traditional place of the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Then they crucify him, and dividing his clothes, casting lots, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken through the prophet. They divided my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. And sitting down, they kept watch over him there. And they put over his head the charge written against him, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Then 2 thieves were crucified with him, the one on the right and the other on the left. And those who passed by reviled him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." Likewise the chief priests also, mocking him with the scribes and elders, said, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. If he is the King of Israel, let him come down from the cross, and we will believe him. He trusted in God, let him deliver him now, if he will have him, since he said, 'I am the Son of God.'" Matthew 27:33-43. The holiest place in Catholic and Orthodox Christianity is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Built in 335 AD, this church was filled with smaller places of worship that date back to the 4th century. The most sacred of places would be the site of the crucifixion, an altar where worshippers can kneel and place their hand down into the rock where the cross is believed to have stood. As well, there is the edicule, or little house, the empty tomb of Jesus. This was built by Constantine after he became emperor of Rome. The rock-hewn tomb was said to have been mostly removed, leaving the actual inner part of the tomb intact, and an edicule was built around it. As well, there is a stone of anointing, where it is believed the body of Jesus was laid after the crucifixion. These sites are believed by Catholics and Orthodox believers to be the actual site of the crucifixion, death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus as portrayed in John 19:41. Number 52. Gordon's Calvary, or Golgotha, near the place of the crucifixion of Jesus. And they brought him to the place Golgotha, which is translated, the place of a skull. Then they gave him wine mingled with myrrh to drink, but he did not take it. And when they crucified him, they divided his clothes, casting lots for them to determine what every man should take. Now it was the 3rd hour, and they crucified him. And the inscription of his accusation was written above, "The King of the Jews." And with him they also crucified 2 thieves, one on his right and the other on his left. Mark 15:22-27. This alternate site for the crucifixion of Jesus was initially proposed by Otto-Thenius, a German theologian, in 1842, and then by British Major General Charles Gordon in 1883. They believed that the 4th century Church of the Holy Sepulchre did not fit the biblical account well. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre was on Mount Zion instead of Mount Moriah, the holy mountain of God where sacrifices were made by Abraham with Isaac and Solomon, Temple Mount. As well, it was within the city limits, although some archaeologists maintain that the site was incorporated into the city of Jerusalem in 41 AD. This site, north of Jerusalem, is the highest point on Mount Moriah and is located in an abandoned quarry with the skull visible in the rock complete with eye sockets, and right along the road to Damascus as you leave Jerusalem through the Damascus Gate. This was a place of stoning, but this practice was outlawed by the Romans and replaced with a more prolonged manner of execution. people would have passed by Jesus as he hung on the cross, as the gospel said. Number 53. The exact place of crucifixion near Gordon's Calvary according to Wyatt. And they put over his head the charge written against him, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Then 2 thieves were crucified with him, one on the right and another on the left. Matthew 27:37-38. As Jesus hung on the cross, he quoted the Psalm of David, Psalm 22, where David cried out to God, "Why have you forsaken me?" Later the psalm says, "For dogs have surrounded me. The congregation of the wicked has enclosed me. They pierced my hands and my feet." Crucifixion involves piercing hands and feet, yet this practice did not exist in the days of King David. This was a prophecy that was fulfilled in Jesus' crucifixion. Then the prophet Zechariah foretold that God would be pierced in Jerusalem. He says, "And I will pour on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and supplication. Then they will look on me whom they pierced. Yes, they will mourn for him as one mourns for his only son, and grieve for him as one grieves for a firstborn. In that day there shall be a great mourning in Jerusalem." This was fulfilled with the crucifixion of the only begotten Son of God, Jesus Christ, at this place. In 1981, American nurse anesthetist, Korean War veteran, and experienced amateur archaeologist Ron Wyatt discovered what he believes is the exact place of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. As he excavated along the rock face wall, about 262 feet from the eye sockets of the skull formation on the northern part of Mount Moriah, he discovered 3 small cut depressions, which he believed were the places where the Romans put the signs with the accusation against the condemned criminals. As well, he discovered an altar stone, which he believed was the placed there by early Christians who knew the place of the crucifixion well. Into the bedrock, right at the site, was carved a total of 4 square-shaped holes, which he believes held the crosses at this place of execution. There were 3 on the lower rock and 1 in the middle, where Jesus would have been crucified. This hole had a crack in it from the earthquake that took place when Jesus died at 3 p.m. Plugging this central hole was a square-shaped rock plug, which was used to cover the place when it was not being used. This is still in the possession of the late Ron Wyatt's wife, Mary Nell Wyatt. These details match the crucifixion descriptions in the Gospels. Number 54. Evidence of crucifixion. Pierced heel bone of crucifixion victim. And when they had mocked him, they took the purple off him, put his own clothes on him, and led him out to crucify him. Mark 15:22. In 1968, contractors from Israel's Ministry of Housing were working in Givat HaMiftar, a Jewish neighborhood in northeast Jerusalem. They accidentally found a Jewish tomb from the 1st century. The tomb was excavated by Vasilios Sasferis, a Greek-born Israeli archaeologist. Inside the tomb was found a Jewish stone ossuary with the inscription, Jehohanan, son of Hagkol. Inside the ossuary was a heel bone with a 4.5-inch iron nail through it. The victim had been crucified by piercing the heel bone with a nail into wood. The victim was a man in his late 20s, and when the nail was driven into the olive wood, it hit a hard knot, which was so hard that it caused the iron nail to bend as it was driven in. A piece of olive wood was discovered still attached to the nail. On the head side of the nail was attached a piece of acacia wood. Likely because the nail was struck into the knot and immovable, the foot had to be amputated when the body was removed from the cross. At first examination, it was believed that the nail had gone through the victim's 2 feet, but examination later on in 1985 showed that the nail only went through 1 heel bone. This is direct physical evidence of the practice of crucifixion in the first century among the Jews, according to Mark 15:22-24. Number 55. The Garden Tomb. Now in the place where he was crucified there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb in which no one had yet been laid. John 19:41. The prophet Isaiah foretold the Messiah's suffering and death. He was taken from prison and from judgment, and who will declare his generation? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgressions of my people he was stricken. And they made his grave with the wicked, but with the rich at his death. Earlier, the prophet David, king of Israel, foretold the resurrection of the Holy One. He writes, "For you will not leave my soul in Sheol, nor will you allow your Holy One to see corruption." This is the place of the burial and resurrection of the Messiah, the tomb of the rich Joseph of Arimathea. In this place, the tomb according to John 19:41, there was a garden tomb near the place where Jesus was crucified. Discovered in 1867 by Konrad Schick, a German archaeologist, the garden tomb seems to fit the descriptions given in the Gospels about Jesus' empty tomb. Firstly, the Gospel says that the tomb was located in a garden, and that it was a rock-carved tomb, not a natural cave. Excavations revealed a Roman-era winepress and a Crusader-era cistern that can hold 250,000 gallons, 950,000 liters, on the grounds. Perhaps this cistern was expanded from what was a first-century cistern. This very elaborate tomb has the burial area to the right, as the Gospel says, and also has a weeping chamber where 3 women went into the tomb. The Gospels tell us that 2 angels sat where Jesus' body had lain, one at the head and one at the foot. This indicates that the tomb was large enough to accommodate 5 people at one time. And this is true of this unique tomb, for only a rich person could afford such a grave. On the outside, there is a track for the rolling stone, a basin for foot washing for early Christians, an anchor cross to the upper left of the doorway, which was the insignia used during the persecuted church era, and a curious fragment of metal in the rock face, which was analyzed and found to be a mixture of iron and lead. These 2 metals, when used together, would form a very strong seal to perhaps hold the Roman seal which was on the rolling stone. Finally, this place was part of a building, most likely a church at one time, as Byzantine-style archways are visible outside the tomb. Altogether, this site fits the many descriptive points as mentioned in the Gospel. Israeli archaeologist Dr. Gabriel Barkai believes that the tomb is not the tomb of Jesus, but is rather a tomb from the 7th century BC, and that the grooves is a Crusader period water trough for animals. This tomb, however, is an elaborate grave, not a customary grave from the 1st century or earlier centuries, and it matches the biblical account word for word. The Gospels are also talking about an elaborate grave that is not typical of the 1st century except for the rolling stone, which was used by some tombs during that time. Number 56. The ossuary of Caiaphas, high priest who tried Jesus. Then the chief priests and Pharisees gathered a council and said, "What shall we do? Because this man does many miracles. If we let him alone like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and nation." And one of them, named Caiaphas, being the high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all, nor do you consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people, and not that the entire nation should perish." Now this he did not say from himself, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation, and not for that nation only, but also that he would gather together in one the children of God who were scattered abroad. Then from that day on they plotted to put him to death. John 11:47-53. Construction workers discovered a burial chamber in 1990 in the Peace Forest, South Jerusalem. Dr. Zvi Greenhut, an Israeli archaeologist with the Israeli Antiquities Authority, examined the chamber. Inside this burial chamber were 12 ossuaries or bone boxes belonging to the family of the high priest before the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD. One ossuary was ornately decorated and had an inscription in Aramaic which read, "Joseph, son of Caiaphas." Within this ossuary were the bones of an approximately 60-year-old male. It also held the bones of 2 infants, 2 teenage boys, and an adult woman. The Jewish historian Josephus relates that Joseph, who is also called Caiaphas, was made high priest by the procurator Valerius Gratus in 18 AD, and that he was removed by the procurator Vitellius in 36 AD. So this is definitely the ossuary of Caiaphas, the high priest, who schemed to put Jesus to death, as recorded in Matthew 26:3-4. It is now on display at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. Number 57. The inscription of Pontius Pilate, Roman governor of Judea. Then Pilate entered the judgment hall again, called Jesus, and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered him, "Are you speaking for yourself about this? Or did others tell you this concerning me?" Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight, so that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now my kingdom is not from here." Pilate therefore said to him, "Are you a king, then?" Jesus answered, "You say rightly that I am a king. For this reason I was born, and for this reason I have come into the world, that I should testify to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" And when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews and said to them, "I find no fault in him at all." John 18:33-38. In Matthew 27, 1-11, we read about Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor who tried Jesus. Unfortunately, there was no concrete evidence for Pontius Pilate's existence until an archaeological team led by Dr. Antonio Frova, Italian archaeologist, and his team excavated the ancient port city of Caesarea Maritima in 1961. This city was formerly the capital of the Roman province of Judea, where the Roman governor resided for most of the year. As the theater in Caesarea Philippi was excavated, Dr. Antonio Frova discovered a stone with an inscription bearing the name Pontius Pilate. The Latin inscription in limestone reads, "To the divine Augustus, this Tiberium, Pontius Pilatus, prefect of Judea, has dedicated this." The inscription, originally placed in a Tiberium or temple dedicated to the divine emperor Tiberius Caesar, was found in the theater in Caesarea Philippi, but has been moved to the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. Number 58. The Shroud of Turin, the burial cloth of Jesus Christ. Now when the evening had come, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who himself was also Jesus' disciple. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate commanded the body to be given. And when Joseph had taken the body, he wrapped it in a clean linen cloth and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had cut out in the rock. And he rolled a large stone against the door of the tomb and departed. Matthew 27:57-60. Matthew's Gospel tells us that Joseph of Arimathea took the body of Jesus and wrapped it in a clean linen cloth and laid it in his tomb. John's Gospel says that the body was wrapped in strips of linen with about 100 pounds of spices. This means that there must have been a main linen cloth with one or more strips to bind the cloth. This is what we see with the Shroud of Turin, a large 4.4 by 1.1 meter cloth that bears the image of a crucified man. The image is impossible to reproduce and is likely the result of a burst of radiation that was emitted at the time of the resurrection. Although carbon-14 testing shows it to be a medieval forgery from the 1300s, the Pray manuscript shows that it is very likely dates to the 12th century. Matching stains on the shroud and the sudarium of Oviedo show that it can be possibly dated to the 6th century. Pollen grains on the shroud from plants that grow in Palestine put the shroud in Israel. Dirt particles in the shroud were analyzed and determined to contain calcium, and the mineral specifically was concluded to be travertine aragonite limestone, which is the stone which exists in Jerusalem. More recent evidence from Dr. Giulio Fonti of the Department of Mechanical Engineering at the University of Padua was obtained when he examined fibers taken from the cloth in 1988. Using an infrared light test and a Raman spectroscopy and voltage test, Fanti concluded that the cloth dated from between 300 BC to 400 AD. This conclusion means that the Shroud of Turin is in fact not a medieval forgery and is most likely the actual burial cloth of Jesus Christ. Number 59. The Sudarium of Oviedo, the small cloth around Jesus' head. Then Simon Peter came, following him, and went into the tomb, and he saw the linen cloths lying there, and the handkerchief that had been around his head, not lying with the linen cloths, but folded together in a place by itself. John 20, verse 6-7. A special but ancient cloth measures 33 by 21 inches and is kept in the Cathedral of San Salvador, Oviedo, Spain. The Sudarium of Oviedo is an ancient cloth that is reportedly the same cloth used 20 centuries ago to cover the head of Jesus. A careful investigation of the biblical account of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus shows that there were the cloths that covered the body of Jesus and another handkerchief that was around Jesus' head. This is called a sudarium and would have collected blood, alive and after death, and pulmonary fluid after the death of Jesus. Death by crucifixion was actually a gruesome thing to behold. The victim would suffocate, and the fluid built up in the lungs would ooze out of the nose. Isaiah foretold that the suffering Messiah's face would be marred more than any man. In response, a cloth had been lovingly placed around the head of Jesus post-mortem. This cloth was then placed next to the burial cloths in the tomb. The pilgrim Antoninus of Piacenza wrote in 570 that the cloth was kept in a cave near Jerusalem. Then, in the year 614 AD, the sudarium was smuggled out of Jerusalem during the Persian conquests and brought to Spain, where it has been ever since. In the year 840 AD, King Alfonso II of Asturias built a chapel and an ark to hold the precious cloth. Interestingly, there is a blood stain on the sudarium which perfectly matches the blood stain on the Shroud of Turin, and the blood types are both AB. The cloth is displayed to the public only 3 times a year, one being on Good Friday. Number 60. Ossuary of Alexander, son of Simon of Cyrene, who carried Jesus' cross. And when they had mocked him, they took the purple off him, put his own clothes on him, and led him out to crucify him. Then they compelled a certain man, Simon, a Cyrenian, the father of Alexander and Rufus, as he was coming out of the country and passing by, to carry his cross. Mark 15, 20-21. In 1941, Israeli archaeologists Eliezer Sukenik and Nachman Avigad found an ossuary along with 10 other ossuaries in a 1st century tomb in the Kidron Valley, south of the village of Silwan. On the side of the ossuary it reads, Alexander, son of Simon. The inscription of Simonali above was a mistake, and so underneath it was written Alexander, son of Simon, beneath it. So 2 names and the relationships are put together which match the above passage. However, as well on the lid, the same ossuary, we have another inscription, Alexander, QRNYT. This word, QRNYT, is a misspelling of the word QRNYH, which means Cyrenian. So we have the ossuary of Alexander, son of Simon, from Cyrene. This means that this is almost certainly the ossuary of the son of the man who carried the cross of Jesus. The Alexander, son of Simon, ossuary resides in the collection of Hebrew University's Institute of Archaeology, located on Mount Scopus in Jerusalem. Catalogued as inventory number 1965, this intriguing artifact has been loaned in the past for exhibition, but is unfortunately not on regular public display.